Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras.
And I'm Natasha Kirchak. Coming up in today's newscast, massive protests erupt against anti-Semitism in the United Kingdom.
A new Israeli study reveals some shocking information about the plants around us.
And a local taxi driver gets the surprise of his career. The UK is set to vote in a historic and tense election on Thursday, and British Jews are feeling torn.
And that's because it looks as though the vote is between Prime Minister Boris Johnson and his Conservative Party, which supports Brexit. And then the Labour Party, on the other hand, under Jeremy Corbyn, which opposes Brexit but is rife with allegations of anti-Semitism.
The situation in the UK has really been a double blow to the Jewish community. On the one hand, you're talking about the Labour Party, which for years was at the heart of the Jewish community. Many Jewish voters, many Jewish members of parliament, many Jewish supporters. And we've suddenly found not only that party reject almost forcefully its Jewish components and make very clear that they're not welcome, but we've also seen the issue of anti-Semitism become a matter of debate in British political life.
Under Corbyn's leadership, accusation after accusation has come out against the Labour Party's tolerance and even promotion of anti-Semitic ideologies. And several Jewish Labour Parliament members have resigned from the party over its refusal to acknowledge and deal with the issue.
A 53-page report filed by the Jewish Labour Movement last week also details several cases of hate speech against Jews, and the UK anti-racism watchdog is now conducting a formal investigation.
But perhaps the most damning report comes from a new TPS exclusive. It alleges that one of Corbyn's largest support networks is managed from the Gaza Strip by Hamas affiliates, and that Hamas terror officials in Gaza and London are actively working to support Corbyn in the elections.
Meanwhile, acts of anti-Semitism on the streets have also been increasing in the UK, with elderly citizens saying it reminds them of how World War II began in Germany. So thousands of protesters are saying they've had enough. And huge crowds of demonstrators braved the cold in Parliament Square on Sunday to stand against the rising anti-Semitism in the country. They say that Britain is better than this behavior and that this is our home. We have a right to feel heard and welcome, and we have a right to feel safe.
The rights and freedoms of the Jewish community to live in safety in Britain should not be a matter of debate like raising taxes or education policy. It should be a given. Right now in the UK, that doesn't seem to be the case.
Now, Jewish groups in Britain aren't the only ones keeping track of the UK elections. Even Israeli officials like Foreign Minister Israel Katz are now weighing in on potential ties with the UK under Jeremy Corbyn serving as Prime Minister.
אבל אני אישית מקווה שהוא לא ייבחר. עם כל האנטישמיות, עם כל הגל הזה שלא מוכחש על ידו, אני מקווה שהצד האחר דווקא ינצח, ובעיקר העניינים האישיים של בריטניה, כי מדובר כאן במאבק באנטישמיות.
Well, joining us now for more details on the upcoming UK election is journalist and commentator on international affairs, Tom Gross. So I guess my first question for you, and it's a wide one, is why are we seeing this anti-Semitism specifically in the United Kingdom? We're not typically talking about this issue in the UK. Where is it coming from?
Well, in the most immediate sense, it's coming from the fact that the hard left took over the British Labour Party after there was a rule change in the British Labour Party 3 years ago, enabling lots of socialists and communists to join the party en masse, then voting Corbyn in. And I think that people are familiar with anti-Semitism on the extreme right, but many people are not familiar enough that there has been a long history internationally of anti-Semitism on the hard left, including the British hard left, which took over a previously kind of social democratic type Labour Party when Tony Blair and Gordon Brown led that party.
All right, well, so what do you say about all the protests that have now erupted in the UK? Is it enough? Will it work? Will it turn the right heads?
Well, anti-Semitism has emerged as one of the biggest issues in this general election, which is unprecedented. Never before has anti-Semitism in the UK been such a major political issue. The chief rabbi, who's a very kind of soft-spoken, non-political figure, used the word poison in regards to Jeremy Corbyn's leadership of the Labour Party. Very strong words. There have been a number of protests on the streets, as we saw, including yesterday. Traditionally, British British Jewish community has not been very vociferous. It's not come out in large numbers in the way that the French or American Jewish communities have in the past. So this is a kind of awakening of the British Jewish community, which until fairly recently felt fairly comfortable. They felt Britain was a country with a very low level of contemporary anti-Semitism, and we have seen an emergence really from the far left, not so much from the far right in the UK.
Now, I have multiple questions. I mean, this has been all over the headlines here in Israel and among Jewish media outlets, but are we seeing anti-Semitism in the headlines in the UK as well? Is this, you said that it was one of the main issues, you know.
Absolutely. It has been one after Brexit and the economy. It's probably been the third biggest issue in this election.
Yeah.
And look, some people would say that it's being used as a political tool against Labour, but in fact that's not the case. There have been multiple, in fact hundreds of incidents of anti-Semitism, some really vicious stuff, you know, sounding like something out of Nazi Germany or something. And Corbyn argues that he's against anti-Semitism, but at the very least he's kind of tolerated it or been very slow to act against it. And
well, my question here is just kind of the impact that we're going to see on Israeli-British relations as a result of this election and this rising anti-Semitism that we're witnessing.
Well, if Corbyn wins, and right now the polls show he's unlikely to, but if he wins on Thursday, I think that Corbyn, besides tolerating anti-Semitism, has been an extreme anti-Zionist his whole life. Before he was leader of the Labour Party, his main job, in addition to being in Parliament, was to work as a paid commentator for Press TV, the Iranian state television station, which has had Holocaust deniers and so on it, with Corbyn. So if Corbyn becomes Prime Minister, I think we'll see possible economic sanctions. We'll see Britain, which is one of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council of the United Nations, possibly voting against Israel. We'll see more BDS and a very bad atmosphere in general.
All right, well, Tom Gross, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, speaking of elections, unless Israeli leaders figure something out in the next 48 hours, the country is heading to a landmark 3rd consecutive vote.
And now it looks like the Likud might just be giving negotiations one more try ahead of that deadline. The Likud Party Central Committee has just announced that it will be canceling its primary elections, scheduled for later in the month, in favor of waiting until elections are officially declared. And in this way, both Netanyahu and his main Likud rival Gideon Sa'ar are showing that, at least for now, they're more focused on forming a unity government. Speaking at a party conference on Sunday, Netanyahu says, "We still don't know if we'll go to elections or not, and we're making last-ditch efforts to prevent it. But if they force it on us, then we'll win bigly." Sa'ar, though, still maintains that he's determined to run for party leadership out of an understanding that change is needed, and he adds that it's legitimate to challenge someone who's held a position for 14 years. Blue and White, meanwhile, is already predicting 3rd elections for the first week of March 2020.
And now with more on the political arena, please welcome Dr. Martin Sherman, the founder and executive director of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies. So Likud has decided to cancel the primaries for the list. Why was this move so important to Netanyahu?
Which move? Cancelling the primaries?
Yes, cancelling the primaries.
I think it would throw the party into disarray. It would cause chaos. It's a very short timeline, especially as I understand there has to be now primaries for the head of the party. I'm not quite sure that the party apparatus could stand the strain of all this in such a short period of time.
So do you think that it really has anything to do, because Netanyahu has stated that really the intent here is that we're going to focus on forming a unity government until 3rd elections are officially called. Do you think that that's maybe just more posturing?
I don't know. You know, I'm very skeptical about Blue and White and their motivations. I think Blue and White's sole motivation and its only cohesive element is not to let Netanyahu in. I think if Netanyahu offered them the moon, they would probably still be very reluctant to take it. It's interesting to just a few hours ago, I understand that Yair Lapid has relinquished his demand for rotation with guns, which could probably push things forward. Although, as I say, I'm a blue and white skeptic, and I'm not sure that this will make much difference in the long run.
You don't think that that would make blue and white more attractive?
Perhaps, although I think that blue and white is such a hybrid organization with no real cohesion other than getting rid of Netanyahu. But the prospect of Lapid being prime minister, I think, might have deterred a few voters. So it may be the question where they'll come from. They may just weaken other natural partners that blue and white needs for a coalition.
Now, in the event of third elections, which I mean, my first question obviously is just if we're actually going to see any progress in the next 48 hours. But in the event that there are third elections, what will change? I mean.
Good question.
The polls show very little shifting.
For all its advantages, democracy has one big detriment. You can never blame the dictator. And so what you're finding here basically is an electorate that's behaving almost irrationally, because in the last elections they rewarded the culprit. They rewarded Lieberman for precipitating the additional elections, when he basically reneged on what everyone saw as his pre-electoral pledges to help establish a right-wing coalition. And in the elections following that, he doubled his strength, which I find extremely difficult to understand. As I say, the person who precipitated the elections was actually rewarded by the electorate, and you can't blame a dictator for that. So I find the behaviour of the Israeli electorate rather difficult to decipher in this case.
Dr. Sherman is basically,
he's flabbergasted.
He's basically telling the Israeli public to get there together.
I'm sure. That's what I'm saying. If the Israeli public, if this reflects the preferences of the Israeli public, that's what they do. And
then your question is, come on, get it together. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Sherman.
Violence against women in Israel has been an ongoing issue, and since the start of 2019 alone, at least 13 women have reportedly been killed by their partners or family.
Well, in response, protests have been springing up all over Israel in support of women who have suffered from violence, and at least one protest has been organized by Israeli youths who learned about this issue and immediately took to the streets. ILTV's Shanna Fold reports.
Last month, Esti Aronovitz was found dead in her own home, shot 5 times, with 2 of the bullets pierced through the back of her head. Though he hasn't been charged, it is suspected that Aronovitz was killed by her husband. Since the start of 2019, 13 women have been murdered by a family member in Israel. November 25th marks the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. And this year in Israel, many stood silent for 13 minutes to honor the victims.
2 weeks ago, we went to a protest, annual day against violence against women, and we decided that we also wanted to do something.
Tamar Harel Santis is just one of dozens of young people who belong to Telem, a mechina or pre-army program in Holon. Young men and women get together for a year of intensive study before reporting to the mandatory army service in Israel. The group even protests together, coming out to the Tel Aviv Museum of Art on a chilly winter night to fight against violence against women.
It was very important to me. I remember that we had a lesson about it. I felt something. And also I have a story with my family. I have a story.
In Israel, 10,000 restraining orders are issued every year, and 60 domestic violence cases are opened on a daily basis. Young people out here tonight say a major solution for the problem of violence against women could be education, especially the education of young men.
I'm privileged. I will not be attacked because I'm a man, but I can support.
I volunteer almost every day with little children, and I try my best to bring in the discussion of gender and gender equality to them. Like if I pick a flower, I'll give it to one of the boys, or if I ask someone to carry something, I won't just go to the boys, I'll go to the girls too.
In the past 14 years, out of the 163 women murdered by their partners in Israel, 50% of those victims were already known to the welfare authorities.
I don't think our government can change if our people don't change.
Super powerful to see both young men and women, going to the streets to speak about this issue. And we'll have more.
An incredible display.
Right, and we're going to have a lot more items down the line coming up about this. But
on another note, yes, in just the last week, the United States has seen 2 grave shootings on military bases. And the second attack appears to have ties to Israel.
That's right. Wednesday of last week, a U.S. Navy sailor shot 2 people at the Pearl Harbor Navy shipyard before taking his own life. And then just 2 days later, on Friday, a Saudi Arabian student studying at the Pensacola Naval Base in Florida shot up his classroom. 3 people were killed in the attack, and 2 sheriff deputies were injured alongside 8 other civilians before the shooter was eventually killed.
Well, the shooter, a 21-year-old lieutenant of the Royal Saudi Air Force, criticized the United States for being anti-Muslim and for being a supporter of Israel. And his tweets say things like, "Security is a shared destiny, you will not be safe until we live it as a reality in Palestine, and American troops get out of our land."
As for the victims, the gunman killed a 23-year-old graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy named Caleb Watson, a 19-year-old airman called Mohammed Sameh Haitam, and then another airman, 21-year-old Cameron Scott Walters.
And it gets worse. Before the shooting, the FBI says the gunman invited 3 friends over for a dinner party where they actually watched videos of mass shootings. And officials say that one of these guests recorded video of the attack from outside the classroom, while 2 other Saudi students watched from the car.
There are a number of Saudi students who were close to the shooter and continue to cooperate in this investigation. Their Saudi commanding officer has restricted them to base, and the Saudi government has pledged to fully cooperate with our investigation. I thank the Kingdom for their pledge of full and complete cooperation.
Investigators say that while the incident looks like terrorism, the FBI is still looking into the situation. Out of 5,000 foreign students from 153 countries around the world, 850 of them are from Saudi Arabia. And both U.S. President Donald Trump and Defense Secretary Mark Esper say the practice of having training programs for foreigners has been done for many decades, but that the whole procedure will now have to be re-examined.
Moving on, Israel is finally getting hit with some more seasonally appropriate weather.
But as great as the storms may be for the environment, they carry some serious risks. It was his friends who saved his life. That's what a doctor from Rambam Medical Center in Haifa said when a 19-year-old was rushed into the emergency room after being electrocuted by a bolt of lightning. The young man and his friends were standing in an open field on Sunday when the lightning came down and struck him. And his friends told medics the next thing they knew, he was lying on the ground, unconscious and severely burned. Well, when he arrived to the hospital, he was connected to a respirator, and though the man is seriously injured, he's in stable condition. Meanwhile, however, in general, Israel's been hit with 24 hours of some crazy weather events. Flash flooding near Ashkelon and Kiryat Gat have wreaked havoc in the south. And firefighters saved at least 8 people who were stuck in cars on swamped roads. In fact, in Ashkelon alone, 6 were pulled out of vehicles and became trapped inside an underground parking lot, one of whom was a pregnant woman.
All right, now put down the salad fork because it might be traumatizing to the lettuce.
That's right. A new Israeli study has just been released, and you won't believe what it found.
Do you hear it? Can you hear the screaming agony? Well, of course not. It's coming from the grass. But according to researchers at Tel Aviv University, the grass is screaming, in a manner of speaking. And the plants nearby, maybe even some animals and insects, can probably hear it. A new study reveals that some plants emit ultrasonic clicks inaudible to the human ear when under life-threatening stress. And authors say that these findings can totally alter the way we think about the plant kingdom, which has been considered nearly silent until now. In fact, the results suggest that we can now learn a lot about the plant's condition by its sound, like whether or not it needs water or is otherwise stressed for some reason. So how was this discovery made? Well, previous studies show how plants can respond to stress by changing color, smell, and shape. So the researchers at TAU thought maybe plants can make audible ultrasonic sounds too, and the results look tremendous. Choosing tobacco and tomatoes to study, the researchers allege that not only do the stressed plants emit more sound, they emit particular sounds based on the specific threats, meaning that interpreting these sounds can lead to better maintenance of plant health. All that said, though, the study is new and has yet to be published in a journal. It also has yet to be certified by peer review, so at least for now, it looks like we can keep eating our salads and vegetables guilt-free.
Listen up, because a lot is going on locally in Israel too.
And you may not necessarily be hearing about it, but don't worry, ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh has the rundown.
Hey guys, so the first story we're going to be talking about is the one that might have a lot of people shocked to hear. A taxi driver, Moshe Barkat, found 15,000 American dollars, which is about 50,000 shekels, in cash in the back seat of his cab on Friday, and actually did the morally right thing.
What is the morally right? Yeah, I was going to say
he kept it and drove away.
Not exactly, guys. He and his wife actually tried to figure out who the owner of the perfectly organized stacks of $100 bills was, and figured out it was a woman in a wheelchair who was accommodated by two young men that the driver took to Ichilov Hospital in Tel Aviv. He said to Israel's Channel 12 News that he usually finds things like cell phones or wallets left in the back seat, but never that crazy sum of like money.
It's also just, I mean, how do you forget that amount of money? And also, how strange to be carrying it in cash with you anyhow.
Yeah, it seems like a very large amount to have in cash.
I think that you would be more careful if you, I would be freaking out if I had.
You think, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But I'm sure they were, happy and honestly shocked to get back the money.
Actually, the driver returned the money to the rightful owners and said that they weren't very excited to get the money back and didn't, quote, cry for joy about this return. They said that the money was intended to pay off medical bills, but honestly, the fact that they weren't beyond excited is truly what I find the most shocking part of this story. Not all people would technically go on a hunt to find and then return that kind of money, and considering the driver did, it just shows what a great man he is.
Yeah, I want him to be my driver. He's
well, I
amazing.
mean, it's amazing. And if somebody returned to me $15,000 that I recklessly left in a cab, I would absolutely be grateful to anyone who brought it to me.
Well, I mean, they probably had been emotionally preparing themselves for not getting that money back. So anyhow, what's up next?
All right, so I'm sure a lot of people have heard how bad the electric bikers and scooter scene has gotten here in Tel Aviv, but I doubt that they know that 15 electric bikers and 2 electric scooter riders have actually died in 2019. And in just the first 9 months of this year, at the very least, 1,400 more were injured in accidents from both. As of Sunday, the Tel Aviv municipality decided to crack down and enforce the rules that have already been in place.
Well, I mean, I ride my bike to work every day. It's getting so crazy in the city. There are still people riding super recklessly on the road.
Well, I saw somebody fall today in the rain.
Wow.
People on an electric scooter. I especially saw the accident happen.
So basically, police, city officials, and representatives from the Department of Transportation began stopping and sanctioning electric vehicle riders who either rode on the sidewalk or without a helmet. And since Sunday, 64 police reports and 70 municipal reports were reported, and actually 47 electric vehicles were confiscated. Officials reported to Ynet that the operation was intended to allow residents to walk the sidewalk without chaos.
Well, but there's also another issue, and that's that the bike paths that are intended to keep things in order are very badly planned out, and a lot of the time end up in odd places that leave a weird space.
Non sequitur sidewalks. They go nowhere.
Yeah, I know that when
abruptly.
I ride the bike, I'm scared to hit people getting off of the bus who could
also
just because they literally go into the lane.
Yeah, well, I mean, most bike lanes, even if they are supposedly bike lanes, as we can see here, are shared with pedestrian walkways. People are going the wrong way.
And pedestrians on their own, it's kind of a scary scene, walking in the street. So
yeah, well, I think the hope here is to live in a more environmentally friendly city where people are using more bikes and scooters, but we need to make everything safer for that to happen. Thank you for the update, Emmanuel.
Thank you.
All right, let's take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight will be cloudy and cool with scattered rains and an average low of 55 or 13 Celsius. And then tomorrow you can expect more clouds and rainstorms with a drop in temperatures to a high of about 64 or 18 degrees Celsius.
And then that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.47 shekels to the American dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube. I'm Aaron Porras.
And I'm Natasha Kirchuk. Thanks for watching.